Hi, and welcome to Noble Character Crafts. My name is Amy, and today I am going to be showing you how I steek this sweater that I have knitted to open up the front and turn it into a cardigan. So the pattern that I followed, just for reference, I barely followed a pattern by Devin Ventry of Knitty McPurly called the Gigi cardigan. And I basically just used her numbers to cast on the number of stitches in order to start this cardigan. And then I used her raglan increases as well. But beyond that, I just did my own thing. But just for reference, in case you want to make a sweater similar to this one, that is the pattern that I barely followed. I made a ton of modifications. The first one of which was that I decided to knit this in the round. The original pattern is knit flat, and I decided to knit this in the round just for ease of being able to knit in the round. And then I also wanted to use up a bunch of my Knit Picks Wool of the Andes worsted weight yarn that I had in my stash to make these stripes. And since I was striping the yarn, if I knit it in the round, then I could add a few stitches to the center front here for my steeked area. And then whenever I changed my yarn color, I could just do that along that steeked edge or opening part. So I didn't have to worry about weaving in all of those ends. So I've just tied those into a knot and cut off the tail quite short because that's where I'm going to be cutting this sweater open to make it into a cardigan. So I also cast on an extra 6 stitches for my steek panel. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be changing out the foot on my sewing machine to this even feed foot. I just found this on Amazon. I searched for my sewing machine as a Singer, and I just searched for the type of even foot feed that would accommodate my machine. And it's very easy to put on, and so I'm going to do that now and switch it out so that the reason why I use this, you can use just your regular foot on your sewing machine, but the even foot really helps the fabric to go through evenly, obviously, hence the name. And it helps since the sweater is such a thick fabric, I don't want it to be pulled at all. I want it to be a very even stitch so that the integrity of the fabric is not changed at all. I think that with a regular foot, it would probably stretch it quite a bit and it wouldn't lay as flat after it's sewn. What I'm going to be doing, I have to kind of be careful because I didn't really mark my steek stitches at all. I just continued to knit in the round. It probably would have been wise for me to put a purl stitch or two in here so that I could tell where my steek stitches started and stopped, for example. But I'm just going to carefully mark, or I'm not sure yet. I'm going to carefully sew a straight line on both sides of the steek stitches. So I'm going to start at one top. I'm going to sew all the way down one side. I'm going to turn around and come back. I just like to do a double row of stitches on either side, and then I'll go on the other side as well. The same thing, up and down again with the even foot, and that will secure the stitches so that I can then cut open the middle and turn this into a cardigan. So I'm going to go ahead and switch out my even foot first, and then I'll try to set up my camera so that you guys can see how I sew this sweater. Okay, I am going to run a thread of some white yarn up the very center of my cardigan where I'm going to cut it, just as kind of a guide. So I can tell that this is my center stitch just by the way that my yarn is joined here at the bottom where I bound off my stitches. So I'm just going to kind of do a simple stitch just to kind of have a guide to know where to cut open, and this will also help me to know where to sew on either side of this. Okay, now that I've got this white thread or yarn sewn into the center where I will eventually be cutting it open, that'll give me a good guide to know where to sew my lines. So I have 3 stitches on either side of this white yarn where I can sew on either side. So I'm probably going to be going into the second stitch from the yarn that I just sewed in here. So I'm going to go here. I'll use my little needle here to kind of give you a better idea. Here's the row of stitches right next to my yarn that I just sewed in there, and I'm probably going to be sewing along this column. And then also on this side, I'll skip the middle, or I'll skip the first one and go to the middle, because again, I have 6 steek stitches that I've added to this pattern. So I will be sewing on either side of this white yarn, a straight line up and down. What I'm actually going to be doing is running my the edge of my foot just along this white yarn. So that'll really be a guide, and I think that's set up pretty well so that I can keep that on a straight line. So I'm going to do a back stitch. Oops, I was in zigzag. I want it in a straight stitch. Some people do prefer to do steek stitches, reinforcement stitches with a zigzag, but I prefer straight stitch. But I'm not going to worry about those couple of stitches I just did with zigzag. I'm just going to evenly feed it along here. I try to go pretty slowly just so I can keep control of it easily. And of course you want to be really careful to make sure that you're only going through one layer of your sweater fabric. Okay, I'm just going to turn my sweater around now, and I'm going to go back up the other side. So again, I'm going to just position the edge of my foot feed along these white stitches here that I ran up. I have steeked several sweaters. I don't know how many now. I can think of 3 offhand, and then I've also altered quite a few sweaters by using this even feed foot to sew up the side seams when they've not fit the way I wanted them to. I'm using black thread, if you can probably tell that, just because I don't want the stitches to be seen at all. But then of course it's hard for me to see the stitches as well. As I'm sewing them, it's kind of hard for me to see where they're going in at, but I think I'll be all right. Okay, I'm just going to repeat that process one more time. I'm going to go down and up again on both sides I just like to do it for good measure, I guess. I don't think it's actually necessary, but I mean, to be honest, I'm using non-superwash wool, and you know, people say that it's not necessary to even reinforce the stitches at all. You could probably just cut it open and the stitches would stay, but I just do it I just reinforce these stitches on my sewing machine just to make me feel better, I guess, before I cut open my knitting. So I'm just going to repeat that again. Now I have these sewing stitches. You can barely see them since it's black thread that I used, but they're just running right here along the edge of this white thread. So now what I like to do is put something in between the two layers of fabric that I'm going to be cutting. So I'm going to grab a ruler. If you don't have something flat like this, I don't know, maybe like a cutting board or anything that would be flat and easy to slip in the middle of your fabric, so that you can, you just slide it right up into your sweater, and that way you won't risk cutting through the bottom layer of your fabric. I like to use my big Fiskars cutting shears. You could use any type of sharp scissors, of course. Okay, I sewed over this yarn, which I guess I shouldn't have done, but I'm just gonna get it out of there, hopefully. That'll be fine. Okay, and I'm gonna try to cut right along this white thread. Did I sew over it at the top too? I wonder. No, I did not. Okay, good. So I'm just gonna give this a bit of a pull, the white thread, so that I don't really want to mess with cutting it, but I am just going to cut right along that middle line. No fear, don't be afraid, just cut her open. I'm going to continue to slide up that white yarn because I don't want to mess with it. Well, maybe I'll just leave it alone. It's easier, I guess. Here we go, and it's all open. So now I'll just get rid of these little tiny white pieces of yarn. It was a little easier just to cut through them. There's not that many really. Okay, so now all I'm going to do is pick up stitches. I'm going to pick up stitches probably just on the other side of my sewn line. So again, I had 6 stitches total for my steek stitches, so I still have 1, 2, 3 here, and I'm going to pick up on this third column, I think, to pick up my stitches for my ribbing. All right, I am ready to pick up the stitches along this steeked edge. Again, I am going to be counting over from the place where I cut. I'm going to be counting over 3 columns. And what I just do is fold the steeked edge inside so that that column that I want to pick up is folded and right on top. I like to use a straight metal crochet hook to pick up my stitches. The one I have here is a 4.25 millimeter hook. And the needles that I'm going to be using for my ribbing are US 6 4 millimeter needles. So they're not the exact same millimeterage, but it's close enough. This is the closest hook that I have in my stash to use, so it will do. So I am just using the crochet hook to go under both legs of the stitch that I want to pick up. I try to get as close to that top stitch as I can, although that's a little tricky to get under there. But as you can see, hopefully, I have 2 legs of that knitted stitch over the top of my crochet hook. And then I will just grab my yarn that I'm using for my ribbing and pull up a stitch. For this pickup, for these stitches that I'm picking up, I'm going to be picking up 2 stitches for every 3 rows. So I'm going to pick up 2, skip 1 along the edge here. Pick 2 up, skip 1 stitch, pick up 2 more, skip 1, and so on. Okay, now I have picked up a total of 20 stitches. I like to pick up stitches in increments of 20 along the way, and then I take my knitting needles and I transfer my stitches from my crochet hook to my knitting needle. So that's why it's so nice to use just a straight crochet hook, because I can slide the stitches off the other end. So I pick up my stitches from the back. They're all twisted on the crochet hook, so I pick up the back leg of the stitch to transfer over to my knitting needles. And then you can see, if I turn it over, how nicely that steeked edge is already starting to lay flat against my work. So here's the right side again, and here is the wrong side, and it just lays so nicely all by itself flat against the the other side of the wrong side here. A lot of times when people steek a garment, they will tack down this rough edge, or they may sew on a piece of ribbon to cover up this rough edge. I probably won't, because I'm just planning on using this sweater for an everyday type of sweater, and I don't really feel the need to do that. But I will just continue to pick up the stitches all the way along the edge here in this same manner. I have now picked up all of my stitches along this steeked edge, and I can start knitting my ribbing on this side. I've actually already done the ribbing on the other side, so you can see what it looks like. This is the side that has the buttonholes in it. And here is the inside of the sweater, so you can get a better idea of how it looks with the ribbing on it. So that is how I steek my sweater into a cardigan and pick up stitches to knit the ribbing. I hope that this tutorial was helpful for you. If you had any questions about how I personally have found it handy or easy to steek my sweaters into cardigans and how I pick up the ribbing, I hope it's been helpful for you to see this tutorial. Please don't hesitate to contact me or leave a comment below with any questions that you might have. I would be glad to help you out in any way possible, and let me know if you found this tutorial helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.